7 most advanced ancient civilizations that mysteriously vanished. Number 7. Nabateans. Semites are people who belong to a particular ancient language group, which includes Arabs, Akkadians, Hebrews, and more, and one of those groups was the Nabatean culture, which existed since at least 312 BC, as they're mentioned as having been attacked by the Macedonians. This ancient and seemingly forgotten kingdom spanned the territories of Syria, Arabia, and Palestine at one point, becoming rather massive. Nabatean writing would eventually develop over the centuries to become modern-day Arabic, and it wasn't until recently that we were able to retrace its evolution. They established vast trade routes and commerce and became an extremely technologically advanced civilization for the day, with vast water systems which helped them survive the arid climate of Arabia. They left us massive structures which aligned with celestial bodies as other ancient cultures did, proof of an engineering genius among these people. Toward the end of their history, they were strong allies with the mighty Roman Empire, though Emperor Trajan did annex the kingdom from AD 105 to 106. We really don't hear about the Nabateans much after that era. Number 6. Minoans. Hailing from the Greek island of Crete, the Minoans were an old Bronze Age civilization that existed from between 3000 and 1000 BC, long before the Golden Age of Athens and Alexander the Great. The Minoans were patently a Greek culture and the forerunners of the ancient Greece that's famous in our history books today, and they were also a very pagan culture, practicing animal sacrifices, burning offerings, having many nuanced cults, and holding wild orgiastic festivals of song and dance. The ancient Egyptians mentioned them in hieroglyphics, which means the Minoans definitely got around in the ancient world, and they had high-quality technologies and impressive arts for the day, but then they declined and disappeared. Theories have suggested that they were decimated by a volcanic eruption in the Santorini Islands near Crete, which must have ravaged the coasts of Crete with waves, ash, raining stone, and more. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, writes that they were brought down by plagues and diseases, but there simply is no way to tell, as Herodotus wrote many centuries after the people of this island had disappeared. Number 5. Maya. Arguably the New World's most advanced pre-Columbian civilization, the Mayans carved large stone cities into the jungles of southern Mexico and Central America, complete with elaborate plazas, palaces, pyramid temples, and ball courts. Known for their hieroglyphic writing, as well as their calendar making, mathematics, astronomy, and architecture skills, the Maya reached the peak of their influence during the so-called Classic period from 8250 to 8900. But at the end of the Classic period, in one of history's great enigmas, the populace suddenly deposed its kings, abandoned the cities, and ceased with technological innovation. Dozens of theories have been put forth to explain what happened. Some historians, for instance, point to a major drought exacerbated by deforestation and soil erosion as the impetus for the societal collapse, while others put the blame on a disease epidemic, a peasant revolt against an increasingly corrupt ruling class, constant warfare among the various city-states, a breakdown of trade routes, or some combination thereof. Number 4. Indus. The Indus began building settlements in present-day India and Pakistan as early as 8,000 years ago, making them one of the earliest civilizations. By the 3rd millennium BC, they occupied over 386,000 square miles of territory, more than their better-known contemporaries in Egypt and Mesopotamia, and accounted for an estimated 10% of the world's population. They also developed a writing script that's still yet to be deciphered, and their cities contained sanitation systems that remained unequaled until Roman times. Around 1900 BC, however, the Indus, also known as the Indus Valley or the Harappa civilization, went into freefall. The population abandoned the cities and purportedly migrated to the southeast. Originally, scholars believed that an Aryan invasion from the north brought about the Indus collapse, but that theory is no longer in vogue. Recent research instead suggests that the monsoon cycle essentially stopped for 2 centuries, making agriculture nearly impossible. Other factors, such as earthquakes or outbreaks of malaria or cholera, may have also played a role. Number 3. Anasazi. The Anasazi culture of the North American Southwest left behind many structures and artifacts for us to find before they ultimately disappeared. Maybe it was the brutal climate of the southwestern heartland or the changing of that climate which made conditions uninhabitable, namely where access to water is concerned, but this is one group of people who also disappeared. Massive structures built into the cliff sides were left totally abandoned and were found in relatively pristine conditions. These housing structures were perfect for fending off intruders, as they were often multiple stories high with windows for the entrance via ladders. When war would break out, the Anasazi would climb into their structures, raise the ladders, and be several stories high above the invading tribes and could fire down on their enemies with impunity. Many Native American tribes, as well as some scholars, claim that the Anasazi never actually disappeared. They just reached a critical mass of size that a society can become before it inevitably breaks into smaller factions and becomes new groups of people, much like ancient Rome. Number 2. Cahokia. Thanks to the spread of corn cultivation from Mexico, indigenous villages began popping up around 1200 years ago in the fertile river valleys of the American Southeast and Midwest. By far the largest of these was Cahokia, located a few miles from present-day St. Louis, Missouri, which at its peak hosted a population of up to 20,000, similar to that of London's at the time. Surrounded by a high wooden stockade, this inaugural U.S. city featured many plazas and at least 120 earthen mounds, the largest of which, known as Monk's Mound, stood 100 feet tall and was built with some 14 million baskets of soil. Meanwhile, just outside the wall, a ring of red cedar posts dubbed Woodhenge likely served as a sort of solar calendar. The city, a natural trade hub due to its position near the confluence of the Mississippi, Illinois, and Missouri rivers, seemingly thrived in the 1000s and 1100s. Number 1. Greenland's Vikings. According to the Icelandic sagas, Eric the Red led a fleet of 25 boats to colonize Greenland around 8985, not long after he was temporarily banished from Iceland for manslaughter. Setting up two colonies, a larger eastern settlement and a smaller western settlement, these Vikings herded goats, sheep, and cattle, built stone churches that can still be seen today, and hunted caribou and seals. Thriving, or at least surviving for a few hundred years, their population grew to roughly 5,000. Yet, when a missionary expedition arrived in 1721, intent on converting them to Protestantism, it found nothing but ruins. Archaeologists have since determined that the western settlement failed around AD 1400 and that the eastern settlement was abandoned a few decades later. The onset of the Little Ice Age in the 14th century was almost certainly a contributing factor, as it clogged the route in and out of Greenland with sea ice and shortened growing seasons on what were already highly marginal lands. To make matters even worse, the market collapsed for the Viking Greenlanders' main export, walrus ivory. No one knows, however, what delivered the final death blow. Some experts believe that they simply packed up and returned to Iceland or Scandinavia, whereas others think they starved to death, succumbed to the Black Plague, or were exterminated by the Inuit, which had arrived in Greenland from Canada at around AD 1200. At any rate, the Vikings were far from alone in their failure. At least 3 other societies have likewise perished on Greenland, including the Dorset, which for a brief time period cohabited the island with both the Vikings and the Inuit. So that's all for today, and until next time, bye for now.